Hello, Dr. Charlie Metcalf here with you. Another book review for you. This week we are looking at Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. This is the updated edition. I've got the older edition actually as well. It's impossible to be spiritually mature while remaining emotionally immature by Peter Scazzero. I guess that's how you pronounce it. Anyhow, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. And when I look at this book as a whole, I want to say that society and even the church, which he mentions in the book, is not great at feelings. So I think about just the educational system, and somehow we teach our kids with the sciences and look at the earth and look at the core and the mantle and the crust, and I'm like, all that really doesn't matter if you don't know how to handle and process your feelings when your best friend does something mean to you, right? And you're not sure how to express that anger, you feel anger, or you don't know how to talk to them about it or whatever. So I think it starts early in school, and then we continue, whether it's inside the church and the educational system, to not talk about and talk about and process feelings. So that's one of the reasons I think that the book was written, as far as this emotionally healthy spirituality, that he's going to look at our emotions. And I do want to just throw out two other books that usually I don't do this, but these have been two books that have helped me personally and when I look at emotions within the church. So one is Facing Feelings in Faith Communities by William Conrath. And this one I did a scholarly book review and a journal on it or whatever. This other one is Gary Chapman. He's famous for the 5 love languages. Here, this is his book, The Other Side of Love, Handling Anger in a Godly Way. And in that book, he just talks about how anger is a gift from God, that usually when we experience anger and we look at it and see the core root behind it, there's usually injustice being involved. And so, you see a child being abused and this rage kind of comes up in you. Well, that's God letting you know that this is wrong, that there's injustice occurring, and then being able to process that and then be able to address the issue correctly. So anyhow, we're not very good at feelings as a society as a whole. This book is interesting in that I feel like it's like you could take it and like rip it in half. That you really have two books. So one, you have kind of a biblical psychology dealing with the emotions that we process and the growth, lifespan development type stuff. And then also the other half of the book would be about kind of spiritual disciplines. And so to me, one of the interesting things is it was like, okay, so he's written from an evangelical perspective, and he's kind of rediscovering these deeper spiritual disciplines that maybe aren't as emphasized within the evangelical branch of the church. And so he's excited about the daily office and what that means and what that looks like to apply to his life. So the other thing about this book overall, someone asked me about the best context. So a friend of mine was going through it in his small group, and he's like, hey, I wanted to send you a copy of this. It's interesting. So I read through it, and I think about, is the best use for it in a small group? Is it in a Sunday school class? And I think yes and no. Like, you kind of have to know your class. Part of the problem is it does bring up and deal with like past emotional issues, family issues, if you've experienced abuse or seen that, witness that in the family, and you go through and you end up, he has this thing where we're really looking at the past and doing these genograms and looking at family trees and of alcoholism and just all this other pain and stuff and turmoil that happens within family units. And if you're not ready to dive into that with other people, or other people have had severe abuse in their background, like, I'd be scared to do it in a small group in a Sunday school class that is either very large or I didn't know personally. I do think that you'd be able to go through it with someone else, with another individual. Like, I don't think it'd be as beneficial as far as processing just to read it by yourself. So you kind of need others to help you process the book. Within the book, he says that, and just in general in life, find trusted companions. And so my best advice to use it would be find a trusted companion, work through it together with a close friend, with a trusted companion, with accountability partner, that type of thing. So the other thing about the book, he sells it like it's a very helpful book overall. Let's just say that. But he sells it like it's a magic bullet, that this emptiness that we experience in our lives and in our spiritual journeys, like it's going to be cured if we can just go through and practice the daily office, if we can practice Sabbath, and if we do those things, it's going to be cured. And so, like, I think of the U2 song, like, I still haven't found what I'm looking for, and that even in this idea of God giving peace and joy and contentment, like, there's always this longing for something more. This longing that only God can fulfill, and I think that only be fulfilled on the other side of eternity. But the way it's pitched and the way it's packaged makes it sound like, hey, the world's been missing out because we haven't done this, and if you just do this, you're going to be an emotionally stable person and healthy and whatever. So I think it does kind of come off like a magic bullet. Anyhow, I want to walk through the flow of the book, just glancing down at my notes here. Shout out to the new San Diego Padres. Brown is back, so I don't know if you can see on there, but I've got the brown and gold rocking for this review. Anyhow, flow of the book. He starts off with this dramatic story about his 3-year-old daughter almost drowning, and he's sitting inside the house and kind of schmoozing with a guy that he doesn't really want to be there with, and talking and just not being his authentic self. And at the same time, like, his daughter is just a couple yards behind him, drowning in a pool. Thankfully she doesn't drown. It was a near drowning and kind of a scary experience. He also gives just a normal struggle with growing in the faith. That sometimes we pitch, hey, just do more Bible study, do more community, you got to live in community with people, get them plug into a small group, you'll be all right, more prayer, more service, whatever. And so he says, even with some of these things, like, you still experience this sense of this lack of joy, this double life that you can have. And then he gives another kind of staggering life illustration of his wife wanting to leave him, saying, hey, this marriage is over, I don't appreciate you, I don't appreciate your leadership at the church, like, I wouldn't follow you, I'm done, I'm out of here. And he brings up this problem of, hey, you could be a Christian for 22 years, and you can be going through those 22 years and kind of living as a 1 year 22 times over and over again. So you're not making any progress. You're not moving forward in the faith. Yeah, you claim and profess to be a Christian for 22 years, but you haven't grown for 22 years. You live that same year over and over. So anyhow, the next chapter he talks about, so you kind of have this idea of this unhealthy spirituality that we have. And then the next chapter talking about knowing ourselves, exploring our feelings, uses kind of 3 temptations. I am what I do, and looking at our performance. I am what I have, looking at our possessions. And then I am what others think, and looking at kind of popularity. And so basic general temptations for Christians across the ages: money, power, sex. And I think you see those things in that chapter. The next chapter deals with the past, power of the past, being able to heal from kind of broken generational sins. And this is where he gets into doing the genograms and looking at different things that may have been in your family. And then he says, as an adult, when you want to kind of evaluate where you are in that process of growth and being able to be your own person, to go through and look at your sense of self after being with your parents for 3 days. So you're hanging out with your parents, talking to them, living with them, vacationing with them, whatever you're doing. And then he says, kind of examine yourself that way. He also lists 10 family commandments, which are interesting as far as just kind of unwritten rules in different families that maybe have never been expressed. Here he has money. Money is the best source of security. The more money you have, the more important you are. Make lots of money to prove you made it. Conflict. Avoid conflict at all costs. Don't get people mad at you. Loud, angry, constant fighting is normal. So anyhow, he does this about anger and success and feeling and relationships and family, all these different things or whatever. Success, getting into the best schools, making lots of money, getting married, having children. But all these things are these values are kind of put into us, and so to examine those for what they are. The 4th chapter talks about the wall, and anyone who's familiar with spiritual formation principles and spiritual formation reading or whatever, he talks about the dark night of the soul. And so for some people this was kind of groundbreaking. They hadn't seen it before, and for me, I'm like, oh, this is normal, that that we go through this period of time that God feels absent, and even when we cry out, scream out, do everything that we know to do, we still can't get that closeness to God. So he kind of talks about that wall and journeying through that wall. Also, the idea that life is tough, and so this is something that I think Jordan Peterson's really good at about expressing that life is tough. This is a Richard Rohr quote that he includes in here, and talking about young men going through this journey, this God-given masculinity, and saying, hey, that they have to learn that life is hard, you're not that important, your life is not about you, you're not in control, and you're going to die. And just coming to grips with those things. So next chapter talks about kind of great loss, pain, that God uses that pain in our lives, brings up the idea of addictions in there, and I think it's pretty, I think that would be worth mentioning here. So anyhow, he talks about addiction, watching TV constantly, running from one activity to another, working 70 hours a week, pornography, overeating, drinking, taking pills, anything to help us kind of avoid the pain. And so coming to grips with that. And then in chapter 6, he moves into kind of the old spiritual disciplines. So he talks about moving beyond kind of devotion and quiet time, that won't cover it. Instead, we need the daily office. And so this is something that monks have used in the past, and there's scripture reading programs that you can go and kind of have morning prayers and scripture readings, and afternoon and evening and nighttime stuff. And so he kind of recommends that 4 times a day. Also here, this is the best part of the book. You ready for this? The principle of Sabbath. If I was teaching a class on spiritual disciplines, like I just used that part of that chapter on Sabbath that he writes about, this idea of stopping from kind of the motion that we're always in, resting, also delighting in the day and having the sense of play and enjoying it, and then contemplate, so being able to reflect on things. And he gives this awesome illustration that when I heard it, I was like, yes, that is the best ever. And he compares the Sabbath to getting a snow day. Sabbath is like receiving the gift of a heavy snow day every week. Stores are closed, roads are impassable. Suddenly you have the gift of a day to do whatever you want. You don't have any obligations, pressures, or responsibilities. You have permission to play, to be with friends, to take a nap, to read a good book. Few of us would give ourselves a no obligation day very often. And I thought, man, what a great analogy when we talk about Sabbath. That the snow day, that it's this free day, that nothing's required, and there is time to stop and to rest and to play and to hang out with your friends and to go outside with your kids and play in the snow, and then come in and have hot chocolate, and you're not worried about anything because there's nowhere to go because you can't go anywhere. So anyhow, great principle there, great chapter. He goes on and gives some real tools to help in the next chapter, which I really appreciated, kind of new skills to love well. And he goes through and talks about this and how to communicate with other adults when you've been hurt, when you've been experiencing pain, and to be able to, kind of the process of what it would look like to be a mature, spiritually mature, emotionally mature adult. So that's a good chapter. Gives some tips on listening skills. And then he closes out with this kind of rule of life, something that you're intentional about, that your conscious plan to keep God at the center of. There are other books on developing a rule of life. This is just one chapter on it. And in that, just a conscious plan to keep God at the center. He'll say that'll include elements of Scripture, silence, solitude, the daily office, study, Sabbath, simplicity, play and recreation, service, mission, care for the physical body, emotional health, family, community, and just being able to craft that into a sentence that you can live by. So overall, very helpful. Like I said, not a magic bullet. I think it's sold as like, oh, this is revolutionary, and I'm like, no, it's good stuff that the church has been doing for a long time when it comes to spiritual disciplines. The other thing that turned me off is there's like emotionally healthy everything. I can get I can get the kit. The kit will have like a DVD and a book, and then there's like journals and all sorts of leader resource vault. I can get the Emotionally Healthy Leader book, the Emotionally Healthy Church, the Emotionally Healthy Woman, book and DVD set and workbook for it. And then there's an Emotionally Healthy Leader podcast, which I haven't checked out. Maybe that's good free resources there. But anyhow, so some of that marketing stuff just turns me off, and that's my personality, but it is what it is. So I did enjoy it. I'd say, yes, it's worth your time to go through, check out Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. Some good principles in there, not a magic bullet, but definitely helps in this process of educating us as a people of what it means to grow emotionally and what it looks like to be emotionally mature, because sometimes we lack in that area. So anyhow, hope you're having a great day, and if this video helped out, give me a little thumbs up, let me know I'm doing something right. You can leave a comment, I'll try to respond to those as well. I'd love to hear kind of what you're reading and what you'd like to see reviewed. So thanks so much.